Welcome back everyone. We're here in our recipe book that we've been building as we learn all the ins and outs of Google Sheets. You have learned how to get started from scratch, how to use all the formatting tools, how to insert all the things, and then how to organize it. So it's ready for you to work with it and analyze it. In these next few modules, we're going to focus on how to work with your data, breaking it down, sorting, filtering, the beginnings of analyzing your data, and so on. In this video, we're going to focus on sorting and filtering. So let's get started. Let's talk about sorting. Like many things in Google Sheets, you can go through the menu at the top, or you can right-click and go that direction. First, let's look at the data menu, so click on that at the top. And if you're new to sorting, this is a great place to start because of how straightforward it is. So here we have a few options. If you currently have one cell selected, you will only see Sort Sheet highlighted, and if you have a column or a specific range selected, you will see Sort Range. First, let's focus on Sort Sheet. Notice my options are to sort the sheet based on which column I am currently in. My only options are to sort A to Z or Z to A. As I do that, you can see the changes that are made. Everything that is on a single row stays together. That's the benefit of sorting by the sheet, and it's probably what you need most of the time, honestly. Our alternative to this option is to click on a column and right-click, or that little down arrow does the same thing, and you have those exact same options. Now let's compare that with Sort Range. So you need to highlight a whole column or a section of a column and come back here. My options again are to sort A to Z or Z to A. However, it only sorts what is highlighted, and the remaining columns and rows and data do not change. So in this case, it's making a mess. This form of sorting isn't as common, but it may be beneficial at times for your spreadsheet needs. Make sure to undo if you don't like those changes. And remember, there's a difference between Sort Sheet and Sort Range. And before we move on, let's take one more look. There was an option to open up Advanced Settings, which is still only A to Z and Z to A, but now you can sort more than one column by making your selections and clicking OK. Again, undo if you don't like any of the changes you just made to your recipe book. Let's try the right-click option with this one by selecting the column again, and notice there is no option to sort range. So in order to get the option to sort a specific range, you have to highlight a range, either one column or more, right-click, and go to More Cell Actions, and you'll see Sort Range. This time, you see the same advanced window that we saw from the data menu. So again, sorting the range means it only sorts what you have selected and everything else stays in place. So in the case of a recipe book, that would make a mess of things. So always pay attention to what your needs are when working with your data, and if you need to sort the whole sheet or sort a specific range. Let's talk about filtering. First, we have to turn it on. So when we go to data at the very top, we can click Filter, or we can just go straight to the toolbar and click on the filter icon that kind of looks like a funnel. We now have a green box around our data set, and notice we have these little filter icons at the top of every single heading on the first row. So first of all, it's called filtering, but watch this. Click on any filter on any column and look at that. You can sort. This sort is for sorting the whole sheet. So you've already learned how to sort the other way, but do you really need to use it? Not really. Only if you want to sort by range. Otherwise, for all any sorting and filtering needs, use this. So let's have some fun. First, I'm going to sort my recipe titles so that they are in alphabetical order. Next, I'm going to go to my time column and look at my options. Remember how we applied conditional formatting? That means I can sort or filter by color. For my recipe book, anything that is white is 45 minutes or less, so I could filter by white so that only recipes under 45 minutes are showing. Here's a really cool trick though. If I don't have any conditional formatting applied, I could actually just use the filter by condition right here. And do these look familiar to you? they look almost identical to the rules that we had with conditional formatting. So in this case, I could select less than and filter so that I only see recipes that are under, let's go with 45 minutes. Notice down below, I could also filter by values, but let's look at that in the next column. Let's go into the filter for courses. Again, we can sort, we can filter by color, but this time I want to look at filter by value. First of all, notice we have a select all and clear button. You're going to want to use those. I'm going to click clear, and then let's say I'm looking for dinner tonight, so I'll select things that would apply to dinner, like entrees and sides and things like that. You can click OK to apply the filter, and now you can see my recipe book is smaller as it only shows recipes under 45 minutes, and it would be something I could do for dinner tonight. Let's go even further and look at the protein column. I'm going to filter by only chicken because that's what's in my fridge, but I'll also select NA because that would apply to my vegetarian dishes. Finally, I'm going to go over to the kid-friendly column, and you can see my two values are yes and no. Remember, that's because we chose those as our values in data validation because the default would have been true and false. That's why it's always important to know what the value of your checkboxes are set to. So I'm going to select only yes to show and click OK. And there we go! These are my only options for tonight. They're the only items in my recipe book that are under 45 minutes with chicken and are kid-friendly. So how awesome is that? And hey, if you want to save this because maybe it's a go-to for you, you can. So let's look back up at the toolbar at the filter icon. Using the drop-down arrow, you can actually select Save as Filter View. Filter views are noted with this black border that you can see. At the top left in the black bar where it says Name, you can name it, such as Quick Chicken Meals for Kids. On the right, you can go into additional settings, and you have an X to get back out of here and go back to the whole recipe book. And when you're here, you can filter even further if you want to. So let's get back out of here. Now let's do that again, and you can now see that we have that listed as one of our saved filters. It's another night on another week, and we can come in here to our recipe book. We can go straight to our saved filters, and in just a few quick clicks, look at that. It's pretty awesome. I automatically have open this filter. And next time, you can actually just go straight to this and click Create a New Filter when you know you're getting ready to create a new one. So think of filter views as something you would like to view more than once. Use the filters out here on the real data, on your real recipe book, as something temporary. For example, my recipe book is not complete, so I'm going to come over here and open my ingredients and directions, and I'm going to filter by the ingredients column that is only showing blanks and click OK, and there we go. Now I can just temporarily filter so I know which recipes need to be worked on to complete my recipe book. Use your filter view to look at your filters that you have set up that you want to look at more often. Okay everyone, that's sorting and filtering, so how do you feel about that? This is when the true magic and power of Google Sheets starts to come out. As you saw, my recipe book was still under construction, and yours may be as well. So in our next modules, we will need a recipe book that is a bit more complete. So make sure you've really filled up yours with a variety of recipes so that you can fully utilize it in the coming modules. When you've got your recipe book all fixed up and ready, meet me over in the next module where we will tackle basic formulas and functions. Welcome back everyone. We've been looking at ways to work with a completed, organized set of data, and now we're going to take a look at some formulas and functions. In this module, we're going to focus on formulas, so let's jump right in. Here we are in our recipe book that we've been building, but of course, what we learn here can be applied to more typical looking data sets. So we're going to use our recipe book along with an extra tab we have down here, the U.S. Agricultural Trade tab. Now remember, we used this in a previous exercise. This data set is provided by the USDA, so you can access this and additional information, including the latest data on their website, which is linked here. Okay, so first, What's the difference between a formula and a function? Think of formulas as basic math, and think of functions as the big, fancy, amazing formulas, but in nice little packages for us to use. So to get started with either one, you're going to type equals, and then you're going to add your formula or function. So we're going to use the U.S. Agriculture Trade tab for this first part, and let's look over here to the right where we have some blank space to work with. Pick a cell and type equals. As I click around, you can see that the cell is represented wherever I've clicked. I can also use the arrow keys on my keyboard, which is helpful. And I can also select a range, and that is automatically represented as well. You can also type out the cell if you know what it is. And notice as I type, it does start suggesting functions. So let's do a formula. Remember, a formula is like basic math. So I can select one cell and use basic math such as add or subtract, and then select another cell and press enter. There you go, basic math. I subtracted the imports from the exports, and notice what I got was the exact same thing as what's in the trade balance column, which is probably what they used to get that data. Also, you can multiply or divide if you need to, and you can also string multiple operations together, always pressing enter when you're done. So, basic math. Okay, now that we have our formulas entered, we can use this blue box at the bottom right corner of the cell to drag the formula down so that it applies the formula to each row. Okay, now how do you know what's in that cell? Let's look at the top left to see the cell value as I move around. You can also double click a cell and it will reveal the formula or the function, and it highlights the cells in the formula with a different color. Notice how applying the formula worked for these additional rows. How awesome. Okay everyone, now let's add an interest rate. Let's add our basic formula of multiplying this cell by the interest rate. Okay, that worked. Now let's drag this down to apply the formula to the additional rows. Let's verify that it worked, and what do you see? It didn't lock my interest rate cell, and instead it moved it down to the next row, and therefore all the other rows except for the first one are not calculated correctly. So we need to lock that interest rate cell. It's called making it an absolute in Google Sheets, and we do that with dollar signs. You can also use a keyboard shortcut, which is F4. So a dollar sign before a column locks the column. A dollar sign before the row number locks the row. So if I put a dollar sign in front of the column and in front of the row number, it will lock that exact cell. So those are your three options: lock column, lock row, or lock both, which gives you a cell. So let's update our formula accordingly and press enter. Now, reapply the formula to the rows below, and let's verify. There you go. It worked this time. It locked that cell where I have my interest rate. Okay everyone, we're back in our recipe book. We've looked at basic formulas with numbers so far, but you can take this same concept and apply it to text. Many times our data is coming from a Google form, a survey, or imported from some sort of application or software program. You may have come across where first and last names are in separate columns, or maybe the address is broken down into multiple columns, and sometimes you might say, hey, I wish I could just add these together. Well, I'm here to show you that you can. Now, when using text, I want you to think and instead of plus. So let's filter our recipe book. So we're going to look at meals with a protein, and I'm going to use my extra empty space over here to the right to play. I want to combine my course and my protein columns. So I'm going to click equals, select my protein, use and now select the course and press enter. There isn't a space in between the two words. Okay, so we can add that. Let's double click and go back into edit mode. Use and at the end and put quotation marks around the word recipe, notice how that was added. So let's use that same concept, but instead of using the word recipe, we're going to use a space inside quotation marks. So now it reads protein cell and space with quotation marks around it and course cell, press enter, and there we go. Just like number formulas, you can drag down to apply this formula to additional rows. So how cool of a trick is that? You just need to remember to use and instead of plus when working with text, and also remember if you are going to add any type of text, including spaces, put those in quotation marks. Here's another cool trick with that. Remember these checkboxes? I get to determine what the cell value is. So let me go into data validation for a second, and I'm going to set these gluten-free checkboxes that are yes to GF. Now, back over to the right, I'm going to add at the beginning and also add an additional space. So now it reads gluten-free cell and space and protein cell and space and course cell. Press enter. Isn't that cool? Remember, there are many times you're going to use this, especially when you're importing data and you need to combine columns together. Okay everyone, how was that? What do you think about formulas? Not so bad, right? Next up, we're going to take one step further and dive into functions. So meet me over in the next module. Welcome back everyone. We just covered the basics of formulas, so we're going to turn it up a notch and cover the basics of functions. Now remember, functions are just the big, fancy, pre-built formulas that are in these easy-to-use packages for us. So functions are really what help you analyze and work with your data on deep levels and work more efficiently than the formulas do. We could spend hours upon hours upon hours on functions alone. So in this module, we're going to take a look at the basics so that you can start applying some of them today, and then you can add more advanced ones to your toolbox each day after. So let's get started. Here we are in our U.S. Agricultural Trade tab, and first thing we're going to do is look at the toolbar. We have a function tool on our toolbar. When you click on it, you will see all the possible functions that you have to pick from. If you click max, for example, it automatically got me started with this function. If I knew max is what I was looking for, I could have also just started typing equals and then started typing max, and you'll see the suggestions that appear. So first of all, let's look at the general layout of a function. It begins with a name, and then arguments that are housed inside of a set of parentheses. Now, the arguments inside of the parentheses are separated by commas. It's also important to know that each function has a syntax, meaning they have to have a very specific order that these arguments are listed in. So, when you work with a function in Google Sheets, it will show you the function's specific syntax, or order of arguments, with this wonderful little help window. It can be expanded to give you further assistance. So let's find the max of this trade balance column. I can select a range. Now in this case, let's find the max trade balance. So let's select the entire column and then make sure we've closed our parentheses. So make sure everything is correct and press enter. And there we go. That's the highest value in that column. Let's use another function. Let's use sum. So I'm looking at 1976. I'll bold it for you so that you can see what section of data we're looking at. Now this data is by month, but let's find what the total export and import and trade balance was for that year. So I'm going to use sum. I'm going to select the exports for 1976, close the parentheses, and press enter. Let's repeat that process for imports. Again, equals, sum, select the range, close parentheses, and enter. Okay, now I want the trade balance for the year. So I'm going to repeat this one more time. And There we go. I could have also just used a simple formula and subtracted the imports from the exports like this and got the same answer. Now, that took up 3 columns and a little bit of work. What if I wanted the trade balance for the year of 1976? What would you do? Can you do it all in one cell to be a little bit more efficient? Yes. So basically you need the sum of your exports, subtract sum of your imports. So let's do that. Equals sum, open parentheses, select your exports for 1976, and close. We're not done. Subtract, and then here we go again, sum, open parentheses, select your imports for 1976, close parentheses, everything looks good, press enter. And look at that. All in one cell, we have 2 functions. We used a simple mathematical operation, which was subtraction, and we got the exact same answer as we did with the other 2 options. But this was much more efficient. So functions are efficient, and you can string them together like any other simple math. In some cases, you can even put functions within functions. So remember to always look up here at the toolbar and click on the function tool and look for the functions that are listed, because there's probably something for almost anything that you're looking for. So always check it out. Okay everyone, that was a bit math heavy, and you're probably in one of 2 camps. You're either in camp, ew, math, where you may now be ready for a break and ready to abandon functions, or you're in camp, yes, show me all the functions, and there's probably a book of Sudoku on your desk, and you're ready to know every single function under the sun, right? So let's look at a few others that aren't so math heavy, but they teach you the basic skills of functions. Here's another good one. It's Google Translate. Again, with functions, you can start typing it, or you can select it from the functions list on the toolbar. Notice this time we have multiple arguments, and it spells it out for us. So first we have to select our text. Okay, so let's select the recipe directions in column E. And then remember we have to put a comma to separate our different arguments. The next argument is to tell Google Translate what language that text is in. If we look at the additional help, we see that we have to use the 2-letter language code, and we need to put it in quotation marks. So it was written in English, so we're going to put in quotation marks EN, followed by a comma, because remember we separate our arguments with commas. And then let's do FR for French. Again, in quotation marks. Close your parentheses and press enter. Awesome! Look at that! Hopefully you feel more comfortable understanding the basics of functions now. These functions can be combined, and of course, there's more than one way to do a lot of things, so it's okay if you find one way to get the same result as someone who's using a different combination of functions. So before we close, I'll direct you to some other great functions to play with, and I promise they're not all math heavy. So let's go back to our list. We were just under Google, and notice your other options here. We're going to cover query in our next module, but you have other great Google-specific functions listed here. Other not-so-math-heavy functions you'll find under date. So many great options here, especially several that I've used for creating a calendar in Google Sheets. Under lookup is some must-haves, such as a VLOOKUP and an HLOOKUP, which means you're looking vertically or horizontally for a condition, and then it returns what you need. Meaning, hey, look through this column, and if it says protein is chicken, then give me column A, the recipe title. So VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP are really great functions to use. Other must-haves are under text, so replace or join or split are great go-to functions. Now you math brain individuals, check out array. Both growth and trend are some go-to functions. And under math, you have your COUNTIFs, and your SUMIFs are down at the bottom. So these are conditions, and you get to say, hey, if this condition is met, then count or sum, which is pretty nice. And even more for you math brain or advanced data users, look at statistical, database, or engineering for functions that may fit your needs. There's so much here, all very useful and something for everyone. It follows the same basic structure that we saw here today. There's just one function I really want to dive into, and that's Google's query. So meet me over in the next module and we'll check it out, and I promise we'll move on from this head-scratching puzzles onto more parts of Google Sheets. See you soon. Welcome back, everyone. We just explored basic functions, and we're going to continue on by taking a close look at arguably Google Sheets' most powerful, versatile, useful function. It goes by the name query. This function allows you to do so many things, and most people love it because it can do the job of many other functions. Some even argue that it can replicate most of the functions of pivot tables. There's so much we could cover with query, so we're just going to cover the basics to get you started and apply it here in our recipe book. So let's get started. Alright, now before we get started, let's go over a little pro tip here. We're going to name our ranges. It will save you so much time when you start working with functions if you name your different sets of data that you know you'll be analyzing, because then you don't have to go and select the data. You can just simply type out the name in the function. So to do that, I'm going to highlight these columns that contain my recipe book. I'm selecting the entire column because I may add more recipes. I could also just select the specific data, but for what I'm doing, I want the whole column. Okay, now I can either right-click and then go to More Actions and then Define Named Range, or I can click Data at the top and go to Named Ranges. Either way. This sidebar window opens on the right. I see the range that is selected and I can give it a name. In this case, I'm just going to write recipes. So don't use any spaces if you do use two words. It needs to be all together as one. Click Done and repeat this process as needed for additional ranges. You can also manage your named ranges here at any time. So, awesome. Now we are ready to get started. Let's talk about the query function syntax. We have three arguments. The data, the query, but with quotations around it, and then the number to say how many rows do we have with headings. Some of the things you can ask the query to do is to select, where, group by, order by, limit, or label. What that means is I can say, hey, look at this entire range, this entire set of data, and select these three columns for me, and only these three columns. Or I can add to that and say, hey, select those columns if column A equals this condition that I give you. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say, hey, give me these columns if the course is entree in column F. Let's do that. Now, with a query, it's going to basically pull a new set of data, a smaller version of what you already have. That is, unless you're pulling multiple small sets together with a query, which is absolutely possible, but either way, it's a data set, so you're probably going to want that on its own tab. Don't worry, our next module is all about how to add these extra sheets, so for now, let's just use the one that we have down here at the bottom that says query. That's the one that we're going to use. We're going to start by typing equals, query, and then open parentheses. Now our first step is to tell what range it is searching. If I didn't name it, I would have to click on this recipe tab, go highlight my data, and then come back. So that's a whole lot of steps. But because we named it, I can quickly type the name, which was recipes. Now let's put a comma because that's how we separate our arguments, and then we're going to open up our quotation marks. And then we get to pick which one of those actions we want to use. Let's use select. So we're going to write select. We're going to say, hey, out of all of that data, select only these columns. Select columns A and B, and then we're going to close those quotations. And the last thing is to tell it how many heading rows do we have. And we have 1, and then close that parentheses and press enter. Okay, so it looks like column A and B came over. First of all, notice that the picture didn't come over, and neither did the recipe links. Also, my formatting didn't come over. If I click in these cells and I try to make a change, it actually breaks my entire function. So here's the thing about query. It's basically like a picture or a snapshot. It's not for you to edit. If you do need to make edits, you need to go back to the original location, and the edits you make there will appear here. It's not for sorting, it's not for filtering, it's just to look at, not to touch. It brings over text only, so this is really great for pulling something that maybe you want to print, which we're going to cover later. And in our case, it's just to give us a condensed version of our big recipe book. We can set our formatting, so let's go ahead and bold our heading, align everything up and to the left, and turn on text wrapping. You can make any additional changes that you would like to yours. So let's go back into that formula, which, where did it go? It's hiding in A1. This time, let's say, hey, grab column A. We're going to skip B because it's the pictures and the pictures don't come over. Let's say we're going to also want to grab C, which was the ingredients, D, which was the directions, and the rest. Okay, so 2 things. 1, these columns absolutely must be capitalized. 2, you have to list them individually and not just simply C through L. Okay, so capital letters, and you have to actually list them out. So get all of these in there and then press enter. And check that out. Awesome, so it's my whole entire recipe book. One thing to note is the checkboxes. Remember, it only brings text over, so it brought over those cell values, yes and no. Or true and false if that was the default and you had not changed it. Okay, so far, this isn't too terribly helpful, right? It's just a condensed version of my recipe book. But I want to narrow it down to entrees only. So let's open that function again, hidden in A1. Let's remove those checkbox columns. And after select, let's write where and say where column F, which is our courses, equals entree. Okay, so we have a query that says, hey, go look up all this data, look at all of the columns, and column F, if it says entree, give me these columns only. Now, 2 things. 1, entree is a word, so it must be inside quotations. We're already inside quotations, so we use single quotes. And 2, it must be exactly as it appears in the data. So, in my case, there's an accent on the E. So I must write it like that in the function or it will not work. So everything seems to look good. We closed it with parentheses and enter. And check it out. How awesome! I now have a sheet that lists out all of my entrees. And what's super cool is as I continue to add to my recipe book on the main page, it will fill up this page as well. So now you can repeat this process and create individual tabs. Maybe you're someone who wants to list out the chicken dishes, or you want to list out the gluten-free dishes. Whatever it is you want to do, you can create as many tabs and use query as many times as you would like to pull out those different sets of data. Okay everyone, that's the basics of Google Sheets' most powerful and useful function, query. You learned all about sorting, filtering, formulas, and functions, so come join me in the next module where we wrap up our skill set by looking at adding and using multiple sheets. See you there. Welcome back everyone. We are nearly there and we've come such a long way. Let's round out our skill set of working with our data in Google Sheets by taking a look at how to add multiple sheets and how to work with them. So let's get started. So throughout this journey, you have become familiar with using multiple sheets and tabs down here at the bottom. So let's start with how to actually add your own. So down at the bottom left, you can click the plus. You're automatically given a blank sheet and it is numbered. You can double click and you can rename it. So let's rename our query tab to entrees or whatever it is you used for the query. You can pick these tabs up and organize them by dragging them and dropping them. And as you end up with a ton of tabs or sheets, you can actually use this All Sheets button and jump directly to the one that you're looking for, which is very useful. Now let's customize these a bit. You can click the arrow or you can right click to display the menu. We've already looked at renaming and moving. I can delete or duplicate, so I'm going to delete this numbered sheet. I'm then going to duplicate my Entree tab, and here's the cool trick. I can now go into my function. Instead of starting from scratch, I can just change out the word Entree to the word side, press enter, and look at that. How quick and easy. I now have 2 tabs with 2 queries pulling out these 2 different sections of my recipe book. Now let's go back into the menu, and this time I want you to look at copy to. We can copy this single tab, not the whole spreadsheet with all the tabs, to either a new document or an existing one. It will appear in the new location within minutes. Now that is super helpful. It will be a copy, so the edits you make here in this original sheet will not appear over in the new sheet. Let's go back down here and let's look at our menu again for the sheets. I can change the color, which is a great idea when you need to label sets of tabs or you need to group them together. So I'm going to color the recipe book tab green, which kind of matches the formatting that I've used. And then I'm going to color these query tabs, and I'm just going to pick a color from my theme. And there we go. Looks great. Next up on the menu, we have Protect Sheet, but we're going to cover that in another module, so let's pass on that for now. There's 2 things left. Let's look at Hide Sheet. So I can hide a sheet, and if I need to, I can go back to View menu, and then I can select the hidden sheets. If you click the hidden sheet, it will show up again. So maybe you've got that landscaping project, you've got additional projects such as a bathroom renovation, whatever it may be, you have multiple projects. When the project is over, you can hide that tab, but you still have one single Google Sheet, one single file, which is pretty great. Same thing if you're using it for budgeting. Maybe you're having to do a budget for some sort of vacation that you're going on, but when the vacation is over, you can actually just hide that sheet, but you still have the one single file. The last thing is View Comments, which we did briefly look at when we were learning to insert comments. So when your sheet does have comments, you can click on this and it will reveal all of them for you in your sheet. And that's it, everyone. That's everything you need to know about additional sheets or tabs. That was probably a much needed brain break after all the hard work of functions and formulas. We've covered a lot of skills needed to work with and analyze data. So up next, we're going to look at graphing. When you're ready, meet me over in the next module. Hello everyone, we're here in Exercise 4. Your first step is to access the Exercise 4 tab at the bottom, and look at that. Does that look familiar? Don't worry, you didn't open up the wrong file or the wrong video. It does look like Exercise 2, but it's the completed version of Exercise 2. So we're going to use the landscaping project that we made in this exercise. So you can either use this Exercise 4 tab here, or you can use your own completed landscaping project from Exercise 2. So what are we going to do? You are going to turn on the filter. You're going to sort the data so that the plants are listed in alphabetical order. Then you're going to use some filters. Without just counting and looking, I want you to use the filters to answer these questions that are listed here. No cheating! Next, you'll come over here to the right and use basic formula to calculate the total cost for that plant. I did add a column with how many plants I was buying. So if you're using your personal landscaping sheet from exercise 2, make sure you add a column and fill it out first. And last, you're going to use a function to calculate the grand total for all of these plants. So pause the video to work through this exercise. Press play when you're done in order to see the solution worked out. Good luck! Okay everyone, how did you do? Great, I'm sure. We're on the exercise 4 tab, so let's first go to the toolbar and turn on the filter. And done! Filters are nice, right? Next, let's come to column A and sort this alphabetically. And awesome. Now I need to know how many plants require full sun. So let's go to that column and we're going to make sure that full sun is the only value selected and press OK. So there's our answer. Those are the only 2 full sun plants. Let's undo the filter and this time look at how many deciduous plants there are. So make sure that's the only value selected and press OK. And look at that, total of 4. Clear that out again and let's look at how many are drought resistant. Now first, we need to know what the cell values are. It looks like unchecked is false and checked is true, so that's the default. Okay, so we want all that are true in this column, so let's go into our filter and make sure the only value we want is true and click OK. So we have 2 drought resistant plants. Next up is time for math. Let's look over here on the right. We're going to first use basic math. So let's do equals. Let's select the price in column D and multiply it by the number in column O and press enter. Let's drag the formula down so that it applies it to the additional plants. And there we go. Last, let's use a function to find what the total for all plants are. So let's use equals. And our function for that would be sum. So sum, open parentheses, let's highlight this entire range, close parentheses, and press enter. And there we go. That is our total if we wanted to buy all of these plants for this landscaping project. How did you do? I'm sure you did a fantastic job. You've learned so much and come such a long way. When you're ready, join me over in the next module where we're going to learn about graphing. Welcome back everyone. We've nearly covered all of the basics of Google Sheets. The only things left are graphing and sharing. In this module, we're going to take a look at graphing. In particular, all of the different types of graphs and charts that are possible with Google Sheets. Let's get started. So here we are, not in a recipe book for once. First things first, let's look at how to insert a graph or chart. We can go to the Insert menu at the top and then click Chart, or we can click the Insert Chart icon on the toolbar. Both options will open a sidebar on the right. Now as an alternative, we could actually select our data first and then use one of those options. And by doing that, it's going to try to be smart and guess which chart type we want. Now notice over here on the sidebar on the right that we have 2 headings, Setup and Customize. Under the chart type, we can select from a variety of options with the suggestions at the top. Now the hardest part of this is picking which type of chart to use, so we're going to look at examples of each of these to get a better understanding of what they look like and what type of data they're typically meant for. We'll look at how to edit and customize the charts in our next video. So in order to take a close look at these chart types, we have tabs for each type along the bottom. Now these all come from Google's Help Center, which is linked here on the first tab, but each individual help page is linked for you on each individual tab up here in the top right corner. So let's explore these chart types. So first we have line and combo charts. Line charts are best for finding trends over time. I want you to notice in both of these examples, the first column is our x-axis or our horizontal axis. Our data is in the columns after that first one. Also notice that each category is listed across the top on that first row. And looking at the chart, those correspond with the labels we see in the legend. So those are our series. The more columns you have, the more trend lines or series you'll have in your line chart. Now let's scroll down and look at the bottom, and we have an example of a combo chart. It has a column chart with a line chart. Again, the first column corresponds with our horizontal axis. Our categories or series are listed across the first row, and that is listed in our legend. Let's move on to area. Now, our area charts, they look a lot like a line chart, right? The only difference is it shows the area below the line, which is good when you need to demonstrate impact, because this is really eye-catching, right? And notice that the data table is set up the same. What's nice about area charts is stacking. So that may look like this, or it may be where you need to demonstrate your data out of 100%. Now usually when we think of out of 100%, we think of pie charts. So think of this as a pie chart trend, right? In this example, it's as if we are looking at a pie chart for January, a pie chart for February, and a pie chart for March, but we kind of put them all together as one to see the trend from month to month to month. So it's a pie chart trend, right? Now, if you'd like, you can set your area chart to look like steps, which means you can then stack them together or put them out of 100%. There's really no difference other than the visual appeal of steps versus lines. So again, area charts are like line charts, but they do allow for stacking, which is nice. Next up, we have columns. Now these work best when we want to compare categories, especially over time. So for example, this first one with revenue and expenses. This could very well be a line chart, but as a bar chart, it's more visual and easier to understand this particular data as a bar chart because it's easier to see what happened in January, but also how that relates to the other months. Now, looking at the next one with survey results, this data is set up differently. The first column is still the horizontal axis, but there's only one set of data, the survey results. We're not looking at a trend over time, so in this case, columns are the best option because these are individual data points and I don't need to see them connected with a line. And if you need to, we can also stack these together, which can be out of 100%. Now you may find this to be more digestible and visually appealing than the stacked area charts. It just depends on what your data is and what you're looking for. And now let's look at our bar charts. It looks exactly like the column chart, right? Yes, because it's almost the exact same. The bars are horizontal instead of vertical, and these are really best when you're comparing individual items or categories and you're not looking for a trend over time. So you could say column and bar are the same unless you need a trend over time, and if you need the trend over time, then you need to use column. Otherwise, they're the same. And on to the pie charts. You're probably familiar with these. These are used when looking at percentage and parts of a whole. So personally, I like the donut shape the most, and I like to make mine 3D. Scatter charts work best when you need to see how two variables are affected by one another, like with this ice cream sales versus the temperature. If you need to compare 3 variables, then you're going to use a bubble chart. Here we have histograms, which are great for showing data across ranges. So you see here that there are varying test scores, but the chart shows students' grades between 50 and 60, 60 to 70, 70 to 80, so on and so forth. So again, these are best for showing data across ranges. And these are candlestick charts. These show the low, high, opening, and closing values, so they're usually used by traders when determining price movements based on previous patterns. These are the organizational charts. This one is just so nice. How often have you tried making this by hand just to have it change, and then you have to go in there and move everything by hand over and over and over again? So with this, no more hassle. Use Google Sheets and it will update the chart for you in seconds. So much quicker and easier. And then we have tree maps going along with the organizational charts. You may have worked tirelessly trying to create these by hand, but Sheets can do this for you in seconds without all of that guesswork or hassle. We also have GeoCharts, which are really nice. You can have these professional charts in minutes without having to use any type of fancy program. So simply type in the information into a table like this, and the map will populate for you. There are also waterfall charts. These are popular among those working with budgets and financing. They show how a starting value becomes a final value through different additions and subtractions. We also have gauge charts. These are another great addition to Google Sheets. These work best at visually showing progress towards a goal, like in these examples. Think of project management and illustrating your progress to completion. We also have timeline, and like some of the others, it takes all of that hassle out of creating a functional professional chart. These can be made interactive like this, and as the name suggests, this works best when showing data or events in chronological order, especially for large data sets. And last we have table charts, which is basically a nice, functional, interactive filter view of a section of your data, and it's just made into a table. Okay everyone, that's everything Google Sheet has to offer, as of right now at least. They're always updating, so check back frequently for the latest chart options. Like I mentioned, the hardest part is deciding which chart to use, and now you see why. So meet me over in the next module and we'll look at how to edit and customize a chart. See you there. Welcome back everyone. You've done the hardest part, picking out which chart to use with your data. Now you need to know how to edit and customize it. That's what we're going to take a look at in this module, so let's get started. Here we are in the Google Sheet where we were looking at all the different chart types. Now remember, these are provided to us by Google Sheets Help Center, which is linked here as well as on the individual tabs. So on this main tab, here's some data for us to play with. But if you have data on your computer, feel free to work with that as well. Also, feel free to type out a small sample data set like this that would reflect something that you typically do, such as inventory, budgeting, survey results, student grades, etc. So this data set that we have here includes 4 instructional designers and how they spent their 40 hours of work this week. And these are the 4 categories of work that their job entails. So let's make a chart out of it. Now remember, you learned how to insert a chart. You can highlight the data and click on the chart icon on the toolbar. It tries to guess which type of chart you want to use, and the sidebar opens on the right. We have Setup and Customize along the top. Let's take a look at the Setup menu. First we have Chart Type. Suggestions are at the top, and down below are all of the options that we've looked at. It looks like for this data set, it suggested a column chart. We have our people, which are the instructional designers, along the horizontal or x-axis, and our categories of work are listed out in the legend as our series. Next on our list of setup options is stacking. I can select standard, which leaves my Y values as a number, which is hours in this case, or I can select 100%. Notice how this displays my data in a different way. Now with this, I can see that Devin spends majority of his time, more than 75%, on project management and planning, whereas Billy spends a lot of time on planning and creation. Now, looking at this compared to the column chart, is that comparison as obvious? Sort of, or maybe not. So if that's what you're looking for out of this data, maybe consider using stacking. If that's not what you're looking for, maybe don't use stacking. Okay, next up we have range. So if you need to, you can update this here But watch if I added another person to my data. It will automatically update it for me. So try that, and if you need to, come here to the range and update it here as well. Next, we have the option to aggregate if needed, which isn't really needed in this case, but sometimes you may need that. And then we have series and a few options below that. So before we look at series, let's look at switching rows and columns. And check this difference out. Now I can really look at each category, such as creation. 2 people use about 10 hours of their work week on creation. 1 person does more than that, and 1 person does less. So this gives me a good insight into how much time is spent on each category of work in a given week. Let's look at the stacked columns. Yellow is creation. So now, which chart would help you identify how much time is spent on each category of work? The one on the right, right? Watch this. Turn on stacking. Now, out of the whole team, it's clear that Claire spends the most on creation and Alex spends the most on edits. With stacking, I have a completely different view of my data. So all 4 of these so far show us something different about the exact same set of data. Okay, now I did the exact same thing, but as a bar chart and placed it beside of its respective column chart. See how they are similar but different? So that's where it's up to you to decide which one to use. Now we do have some other chart types that we could use, like the line chart or the area charts, but these really aren't going to give us anything useful with our data. Alright, so this is why it's important that you know what you're looking for before you create a chart. Let's say I knew I wanted a chart that showcased the tasks that are completed by the instructional designers within a single week. This column chart with categories along the x-axis would serve that purpose, as opposed to the individual people listed along the x-axis. So we have our chart. Now it's time to customize it. Meet me over in part 2 where we will customize this chart. Welcome back. We are in part 2 of editing and customizing charts. Let's start where we left off. We have our chart. We have used the setup section of the chart editor, and now we're going to go through the Customize tab. So here we are in the Customize tab. First up is Chart Style, which you can set your color, your font, and these additional options such as 3D. Are you looking to change the colors of the bars? Remember, that is in our theme, so you need to go to Format, Theme, and then pick a theme and customize it if you need to. Now, back to our chart editor. Next we have our labels. Use this drop-down to select the title that you want to customize. As a rule of thumb, always, always, always add a chart title and label both horizontal and vertical axis. Your subtitle would be a little bit more optional, but always add all 3 of these when possible to have a well-labeled professional chart. Go one step further and make sure the units are included, such as in this case, the vertical axis is in hours. Customize your font, your size, and your color. You can also pick up and move the title boxes if you want to. Next we have series, so you can select an individual series and customize it. Now for the most part, you're probably going to leave this alone because you're going to make those changes in the theme. But if you need to point out a series in particular, especially for some form of presentation, you may find it helpful to change the line color and thickness to outline that data point. This is also where you'll see your options for error bars, data labels, and trend lines. Next is our legend. You can decide where the legend looks best for you with this position drop-down menu. Not only that, you can pick it up and move it to where you want it, like this. You can also format the font, the size, and the color. Our next two options are for formatting the horizontal and vertical axis. For the horizontal axis, you may find it helpful to reverse your axis order for some data sets. People also enjoy using the slant labels. For the vertical axis, you can format it. You can turn on the axis line. In many cases, you'll want to update your min and your max. So, for example, there are 40 hours in a work week, so it would maybe be helpful to make the max 40. Notice how that little change makes a difference of how my data is displayed. Imagine this was money, and the goal was $40,000. You'd want to demonstrate it like this. Also, you have additional options down here like scale and formatting of the data, meaning if you don't have the data labeled as money, you could set that here. Last up is grid lines and ticks. Oftentimes you'll need to update this as well because the default is pretty minimal. You can change both the vertical and horizontal axis with this drop-down menu. So under horizontal, you can turn on those major ticks. You get to set the position, the length, the thickness, and also the color. For the vertical axis, you can set your major and minor spacing. Count means how many total counts there are. So if you set this to 3, I have 3 labels or 3 counts. If I set this to step, that corresponds with the data unit. So if I put 10, that would be 10 hours. And I would have a line every 10 hours. Same is true for minor spacing. You can use count or step. Now down here you can turn these major and minor lines on or off, and you can customize the color, and just like the horizontal axis, you can set your tick marks. Okay, so you've learned how to insert a chart. You've learned how to use the chart editor with the setup tab and the customize tab. Last thing for us to look at is the actual chart area itself. The chart is treated like an image over cells, meaning you can resize it and pick it up and move it around the sheet. If you need to enter edit mode and open the chart editor, you can actually just double click and it opens it up quickly and easily for you. Now, like we've seen, you can move these titles and labels, and you can move the legend. Double click the title to change it or the series that you need in the legend. You can also resize and move the chart itself. Also notice as you double click on other items in the chart editor changes. Click the grid line in the chart to open the menu of options for customizing grid lines. So click around some more and watch how the chart editor changes. Okay, so let's close the chart editor for now. Now check out the 3-dot menu in the top right corner of the chart. Edit will open up the editor again, which we also just learned we could double click. We also have the option to download just this chart, which is great for any form of presentation that you need to make. You can also publish or copy the chart. The last one is for providing alt text, which is essential when providing accessibility to all. The last thing we have is move to own sheet. This puts the chart on its own sheet like this. This really helps remove all of the clutter and allows you to really look closely at the chart. Notice your option at the top right, such as edit, copy, and delete. You may find times when it is more useful to have the chart on its own sheet. Not only that, now that the chart is nice and large for you to look at, you may be sitting here thinking, I want to change some of the formatting. So you can go back in and make those changes as needed. Okay everyone, you made it! You've learned all the basics of charts in Google Sheets. You've seen all the possibilities, you know how to insert a chart, and you know how to edit and customize the chart. We're coming to the end of our training because coming up in our next modules, we're going to focus on how to share, publish, and download a completed Google Sheet. So when you're ready, meet me over in the next module. Hello everyone, we are here in exercise 5. In this exercise, we're going to use the U.S. agricultural trade data that we have worked with a few times now and is located on this tab down at the bottom. Your first step is to create a chart that illustrates the total value of exports and imports by year, not month, meaning the x-axis will be by year and not months. So it is your job to select the year column, the export column, and the import column, and then create a chart, and decide which one represents the data clearly. Next, you'll work your way through the setup section and the customize section of the chart editor. Make sure you add effective titles and units to those titles when needed. Also make sure to add any formatting and set your grid lines and ticks. Go ahead and take some time to work on this right now. Pause the video, and when you're ready, press play to see the solution. Good luck! How did you do? Fantastic, I'm sure. So here we are looking at the data provided by the USDA that we've been looking at. Remember, the link for more information, including the latest version of this data, is located at the link here. First thing we need to do is highlight our data, so the year, the exports, and the imports, and then click the chart icon on the toolbar. Our editor opens on the right in the sidebar, and the chart opens here in the middle. Now we need to decide which chart type looks best and adjust our settings in the setup section of the editor. We want our x-axis to be the year, and we want our two series to be the exports and the imports. Also, down here we do want to say that yes, the first row are headers. We also want to say that column A, our years, are the labels, and they are text, they are not numbers. Okay, good. Now let's check out these chart types. Click around and see the difference between these and which chart best illustrates exports and imports. It looks like the line chart may be our best option. So there we go. I do think I want to aggregate my x-axis. That looks so much better, showing the trend over time. Now, if maybe I was just looking at 1 or 2 years, I could leave it as it was, but this is a large amount of data, so aggregating really helps to see that trend over time. Now we can look at the Customize section of the editor. You can set any style that you would like, maybe smooth the lines if you prefer that look. Next, we need to add an effective title. I'm going to go with Total Value of U.S. Agriculture Trade from 1975 to 2021. And I'm also going to center and bold my title. We also need to set our horizontal and vertical titles. So horizontal would be year, and I'm going to bold that as well. Vertical is US dollars, and I think I'm going to bold it too. I think formatting wise, I'm going to leave the rest as is, but maybe I'll change my mind later. Next we have series, so we can customize the imports and exports. I think I want to change the color of these two series. When I go to change the color, notice my theme colors are at the top, which you can change your theme if you'd like. I'm going to pick from my theme colors here, and then repeat that for the other series. Now that I see this, I think I want to change the color of my title as well. So I'm going to go back up there, pick a color from my theme for my chart title, and there we go. Next up, we have our legend. Personally, I like to place my legend on the right or inside when possible, and then I like to move it to a location that I think fits the chart best. And I think I prefer for it to be right here on the inside, because I do have a lot of empty white space to use. Now we have our horizontal axis. I could reverse the order, but I think I prefer the year to be ascending left to right. And I could slant my labels. Now typically I do prefer 30 and 60 degrees, but in this case 90 degrees seems to provide the most accurate labels on this axis, so I'm going to go with that. And now onto our vertical axis. I personally like to show the axis line. I also think for this, when we're looking at billions of dollars, maybe we should set a scale factor. So I can set billion, and now look at how much easier that vertical axis is to read. I also want to set the number format to currency and rounded so that we don't see the cents. There we go. That looks so much better, right? We made these changes, so that means we now need to make note of this in that vertical axis title. So let's go back up there and add billion in parentheses so that the person reading this knows that it's $5 billion and not $5. Last up is our grid lines and our ticks. So horizontal, I think it would be helpful to turn on major ticks on this because there are just so many years listed across this x-axis. Set the preferences that appeal to you, and there we go. Now vertical axis, the major spacing looks pretty good. I do think I'm going to add some minor spacing, and I'm going to do a count of 4. With that, it means each line represents $1 billion, which is really going to help a person looking at this chart. Now I think adding major ticks will be helpful as well, and I'll customize it to something that I like this. Okay, I think that looks helpful and easy for the viewer. And it looks like we're done. Now let's move this chart to its own sheet and take a look at what we've created. And there we go, check it out. Now that you see your chart on such a large scale, are there changes that you would like to make? I think I'm going to go back in here and add some point shapes. I think I'm also going to adjust my legend a little bit and make any additional changes that you see fit, and there you go. Good job, everyone!